You are standing in your kitchen at 2 o'clock in the morning, wearing sweatpants you have not washed in at least 8 days.
Brother, ugh.
Staring blankly through a little glass window with a metal mesh screen. Inside this magical glowing cube, a sad, 3-day-old slice of pepperoni pizza is rotating slowly on a glass plate. You are waiting exactly 45 seconds for this box to blast your leftovers with invisible radiation so you can eat it standing over the sink like an absolute goblin. You take this magic box entirely for granted. You punch in the numbers, it makes a loud, aggressive humming noise, and suddenly your food is dangerously hot on the edges and completely frozen in the exact center. You probably think this appliance was carefully designed by culinary experts trying to make cooking more convenient for the modern family. But the technology allowing you to aggressively ruin a perfectly good slice of pizza was never meant for your kitchen at all.
But why?
It was actually designed to detect Nazi bombers crossing the English Channel during World War II, and the only reason it ended up sitting on your countertop is because a military contractor working with highly dangerous equipment accidentally melted his pocket snacks. Let us rewind the clock back to 1945. Meet Percy Spencer. Percy is not a classically trained physicist with a wall full of Ivy League degrees. He is a guy who grew up on a farm in Maine, dropped out of grammar school at age 12 to work in a spool mill, and eventually joined the Navy, where he taught himself advanced trigonometry and calculus while standing night watches on a ship. By the end of the Second World War, this self-taught genius is working for Raytheon, a massive defense contractor that builds weapons and radar equipment for the military. Raytheon is manufacturing something called a magnetron. What exactly is a magnetron? It is essentially a heavy, incredibly expensive metal vacuum tube that spits out high-powered radio waves. Think of it as a very aggressive, invisible flashlight that the military uses to bounce signals off enemy airplanes from miles away, so they know exactly where to aim their anti-aircraft guns. These machines were highly classified, incredibly dangerous, and definitely not meant to be used for reheating macaroni and cheese. One day, Percy is standing directly in front of an active, fully powered military magnetron. He is probably thinking about complex mathematical equations or how to win the war, when he notices something deeply alarming. His leg feels warm, and his pants pocket feels weirdly wet. Now, usually, when a man in a white lab coat working around experimental military technology feels unexpected dampness in his trousers, it is a very bad day. It usually means something has ruptured, or you are about to become a superhero with a terrible, tragic backstory. But Percy reaches into his pocket and pulls out a sticky, completely melted peanut cluster candy bar. The radar machine had just cooked his pocket snack using nothing but invisible waves of energy. A normal, rational person in this situation would have panicked. A normal person would have immediately gone to a hospital to figure out what invisible military death rays were doing to their internal organs. Percy Spencer, being an absolute madman of science, did not care about his organs. He only cared about the candy. He looked at the melted chocolate, looked at the deadly radar weapon, and immediately decided to put more food in front of it. Percy runs out of the laboratory, buys a bag of raw popcorn kernels, comes back, and places them directly on top of the magnetron. Within seconds, the kernels start violently popping all over the expensive military equipment. The engineers in the room are absolutely baffled. Next, Percy decides to escalate things. He brings in a raw, unpeeled egg. He cuts a hole in the side of a metal kettle, puts the egg inside, aims the military-grade radiation death ray directly into the hole, and calls a curious co-worker over to take a closer look. The co-worker leans his face right up to the hole, just as the rapid buildup of internal steam causes the egg to violently explode directly into his face. Hot, radioactive egg shrapnel goes everywhere. And at that exact moment, wiping boiling yolk off his colleague's face, Percy Spencer realizes he has just invented the greatest cooking appliance in human history. Or at least, the absolute fastest way to weaponize breakfast.
Nice.
Raytheon, a company entirely focused on winning global conflicts with radar technology, suddenly realizes they are sitting on a culinary goldmine. In 1945, they officially file a patent for a high-frequency dielectric heating apparatus. But how does it actually work? It is completely brilliant and deeply stupid at the same time. Microwaves do not actually cook your food with heat like a normal oven does. Instead, the magnetron shoots invisible waves into the box that target water molecules inside your food. The waves cause these water molecules to freak out and flip back and forth billions of times every single second. All that microscopic vibrating creates friction, and friction creates heat. It is basically the molecular equivalent of rubbing your hands together really fast to get warm, except it is happening on a microscopic level inside a hot pocket. That is why the bowl always gets hotter than the soup, and why the middle of your burrito is always frozen solid. The waves just cannot penetrate deep enough to cause that friction all the way through the dense matter. So Raytheon has this incredible new technology. They can cook food in mere seconds using the power of friction. In 1947, they decide to release the very first commercial microwave oven. They give it a very cool, sci-fi name. They call it the Radarange. There's just one tiny little problem with their genius product launch. The Radarange is essentially just a raw military magnetron stuffed inside a metal cabinet. It is 6 feet tall. It weighs 750 pounds. And it costs $5,000, which is roughly the equivalent of $70,000 today. Oh, and because the military-grade magnetron runs so ridiculously hot, the entire oven has to be permanently hooked up to a continuous flow of cold running water just to prevent it from melting down the entire building. Imagine trying to sell this absolute monstrosity to a regular consumer in the late 1940s. The sales pitch is basically asking a family to install a 3/4-ton military radar weapon in their kitchen, hook it up directly to the city water mains with custom plumbing, and pay the price of a luxury automobile. Also, they can bake a potato in 4 minutes instead of an hour. Unsurprisingly, average people absolutely refuse to buy it. The only people who buy the original Radarange are huge commercial restaurants, luxury cruise ships, and very wealthy people who just really hate waiting for their soup to get hot. But Raytheon is a massive defense contractor, and they are incredibly stubborn. They refuse to admit defeat. They know the technology works, they just need to figure out how to stop it from being the size of a refrigerator. In 1965, Raytheon outright buys Amana Refrigeration, a home appliance company, and decides to try the commercial market one more time. Over the next few years, engineers work frantically to shrink the deadly radar tube into something that will not require a forklift to install. By 1967, they finally crack the code. They release the Amana Radarange for the home. It only costs $500. It sits on a countertop. It runs on a standard household electrical plug instead of requiring its own dedicated water cooling tower. And finally, people start buying it. Why? Because the corporate marketing for this thing was completely unhinged. They aggressively advertised it as the greatest technological leap since the discovery of fire. They printed entire cookbooks dedicated exclusively to microwave cooking, encouraging desperate housewives to cook entire Thanksgiving turkeys, bake complex layered cakes, and boil raw steaks inside the microwave. If you look up microwave cookbooks from the 1970s, they look like horror movie props. Pale, gray, rubbery meats suspended in bubbling gelatin, all cooked via military radar radiation in under 10 minutes. It was a culinary dark age fueled entirely by corporate hubris. By the 1980s, the technology became incredibly cheap to manufacture. The massive, heavy transformers were replaced by lighter, cheaper components. The clunky mechanical dials were replaced by those plastic buttons that always get sticky and eventually crack. Every single kitchen in the world suddenly had a magic box sitting on the counter. We realized that boiling a steak in a microwave was a crime against humanity, and we collectively agreed to only use this miraculous scientific achievement for reheating coffee, popping popcorn, and melting cheese over tortilla chips. Which brings us perfectly back to right now. The military-grade radar technology that helped track enemy aircraft won a global conflict and required a team of brilliant engineers to painstakingly domesticate over 3 decades, is currently sitting directly in front of you. It is coated in a thin layer of hardened chili splatter from 6 months ago, because you are physically incapable of wiping it down with a damp sponge. You complain loudly when it takes longer than 2 minutes to heat up a plastic tray of generic frozen noodles. You never use the power settings because figuring out how to reduce the wattage by 50% is a mathematical puzzle you simply refuse to solve. You just press the add 30 seconds button over and over again until you hear popping sounds. You pull your sad, unevenly heated slice of pizza out of the magic box. The crust is soggy, the cheese is molten lava, and you are going exactly where you belong, back to the sink, to eat it like a goblin.